Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Kosova House. It's great to have such a full room and to be here this afternoon with the Prime Minister of Kosovo, with Mr. Albin Kurti. It's a delight to see you again, sir. And we have, as is part of a tradition, an esteemed economist joining us. This is the second time the Prime Minister's had a conversation like this at WEF at the Kosovo House. And with us this year we have Professor Carl-Benedikt Frey, who is from Oxford University, focused on AI and work, and a leading authority in this area. So it's a delight to have you both with us. I'm Brad Staples. I'm the CEO of APCO. We're a global advisory and advocacy group. And the theme today is the intersection of two forces that are shaping our world. It's not President Trump and Greenland. We will not be talking about those issues for once. We're going to be talking about something more interesting, which is the rapid acceleration of artificial intelligence and the question of what kind of governance delivers the best outcomes for societies that are navigating this change, what's going to be secure, inclusive growth, and perhaps lead to a burgeoning middle class. Kosovo offers a particularly compelling and interesting case in that context. Over the past 4 years, the country has achieved extraordinary growth, over 4%, as recognized by the World Bank, and it's set to lead other Western Balkan countries in terms of GDP growth this year and next year, which is exciting. At the same time, like every nation, Kosovo is operating in a world that's undergoing profound technological, geopolitical, and institutional shifts, which are impacting its citizens as others around the world. So our conversation today is about understanding this moment. What are we experiencing globally? How are governments going to ensure the well-being of their populations, technological progress that translates into democratic and societal progress? So, I'd like to begin to invite both of our panelists to help us frame this moment, to understand the moment that we're in. So, perhaps, Prime Minister first. How can we best make sense of the disruption and the transition that we're going through at the moment? What sort of leadership is needed to navigate a moment like this? Perhaps you can help us to understand the moment and the leadership that's needed to respond to it.
Thank you very much for this question and for this conversation. Welcome to House of Kosova. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you here. Let me start by saying that I belong to those who believe that values and interests should not be decoupled. I'm not saying that they are one and the same thing. I'm not saying that quite often one is not going to encounter difficult choices, but then again, starting point should be that we don't need to decouple these two. So when you say leadership, I immediately think of democratic leadership. Not only pursuing a certain idea that you turn into a program as an assembly of goals and objectives, but also maintaining the contact and unity with people. As a leader, you should not detach yourself from the people, because that is the possibility for corruption. Once you have detached yourself from the people, in terms of cultural mindset, in terms of awareness in a situation, in terms of financial and material wealth, this detachment is going to create the possibility for corruption. Therefore, democratic leadership implies ideas that you pursue, but at the same time, it implies a sense of community and togetherness with people with whom you are trying to implement a certain program with a plethora of projects and activities. Therefore, it must be a democratic leadership, because it has to be together with the people. You know, people might still do well without politicians, but politicians have no meaning without people. And one should bear this in mind all of the time. So if you have this consciousness that I'm advocating for, then you have to cohabitate with a certain schisma within yourself as individual. Democratic leader is someone who is so democratic that almost not really a leader, is a leader who understands that actually is following the people, not only leading them. So perhaps this schisma is not the one that enables anymore to talk about leader as individual. It's like almost individual. Don't misunderstand me, it's still you. But you that cohabitates with this schisma, with this crack within subject of yours, that you're supposed to lead, but actually you are so democratic in leading, so much attached to the people that you're almost following and people are leading.
How
So
does
this is what I believe is what we need both in times of crisis and when we don't have it.
So we have a moment here that's not a crisis, but it's a moment of extraordinary transition and change. How much pressure does that put on the model you just described?
Of course, pressure is vast, but then again, if you are a democratic leader, you don't think of yourself as alone. Precisely by being a democratic leader, you think yourself as part of a team, as part of a community and a collective, depending on activity and project. But a democratic leader never feels alone. Actually, one of the goals of pressure is to isolate you from the people. And you have to mind that all the time. But as long as you are close with people and you put public interest at first, you care about social well-being of your country, you distribute and redistribute wealth, you understand that economic growth is not economic development, and economic development is not by itself economic progress, but you have to intervene, and always the whole is the starting point of your thinking and as a goal, then there is no pressure that one cannot withhold, because it's not only you who is being pressured. So I think this is what I could more or less try to rather describe than explain what I think that democratic leadership is.
Professor Frey, in terms of this moment, it's not without precedent, but it has a scale and dimensions that we possibly haven't seen before in terms of technological innovation and how it's reshaping society and putting pressure on democracy. Can you help us to understand this moment in time and what we're seeing with AI and all that it brings in the context of the arc of history, and perhaps reflecting on some of the comments from the Prime Minister?
Well, thank you first of all to the House of Kosovo, and thank you to the Prime Minister for the honor. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. So I think the Prime Minister made an important point, which is about democratic participation. Artificial intelligence can either be a centralizing tool, which centralizes decision-making in the hands of a few powerful individuals, or it can be a democratizing tool that gives citizens and workers the means to do more themselves and make better decisions for themselves. And I think if you go back historically, the importance of democratic participation in technological transformations is It's particularly clear if you look at Britain during the first Industrial Revolution. So Britain, by the standards of the day, was relatively democratic. And it taxed itself at 2% to provide for the poor. And the poor laws actually meant that there was less resistance to mechanization in places where they were more generous. But it's also true that you had something called Engels' pause. So living standards in Britain did not take off as the economy took off, because property ownership was still a requirement for voting, and so people voted with sticks and stones. They went out and smashed the factories that were built in order to power the first industrial revolution. That's quite different, I would argue, to the late 19th century experience in the United States, where you see what became known as the robber barons emerging. Large technology monopolies, not unlike what we see today, and a political system that was built on patronage, the idea that you essentially give people goodies, such as jobs within the civil service, in exchange for votes. This was an extraordinarily corrupt system, and what changed trajectory was the mobilization of democratic forces, the mobilization of voters that went out and showed their dissatisfaction. That led to the Pendleton Act, which instituted the meritocratic civil service in the United States. That led to the Sherman Antitrust Act, among other things, to regulate large technology companies and make sure that entry was still possible. Because it's in the end of the day, the entry of new firms that drive technological progress over the long run. Why is that? Well, the key reason for it is that large firms, they have scale, and they tend to invest in process innovation and automation. And that's important because that drives down costs and makes goods more available to a larger share of the population. And so it is important that firms are committed to scale as long as they don't engage in anti-competitive behavior. But smaller firms that don't have scale, their advantage is building new products, creating new types of industries. And those are the ones that are most important over the long run for both jobs and growth. If all we've done since 1800 was automation, we would have productive agriculture, we would have cheap textiles, but that's about it. No antibiotics, no vaccines, no rockets, no airplanes, no computers. Most growth comes from doing new and previously inconceivable things. And I think that is something worth thinking about when we think about the AI revolution. Because the critical question is, what are we going to use AI for? Are we only going to use it for automation, or are we going to use it to create new products and new kinds of industries that create more jobs and leads to more rapid sustained growth, but also, as importantly, more inclusive growth as it creates new jobs for people in the economy?
If I just may relate it, but I think economic historians are very useful in understanding things. And I envy you, I must say. I've been formed and informed by a lot of economic historians, from John Maynard Keynes, for example, to Giovanni Arrighi and Thomas Piketty recently. And I think it's very important to see economic trajectories throughout different historical epochs. Let's agree that this is AI revolution. Nowadays, there is no government project that doesn't have a component of AI. So we definitely use it. And it is helping us across the board, especially in terms of public services. We have this platform Kosova with hundreds of services online, which are increasing the quality of the services, accessibility to the citizens. But also on the side of the system, they are bringing more transparency and accountability. However, as you said, Professor, I fully agree, we should see, while we employ AI, what happens to economic growth and what happens to social inequality. By using AI, are we enhancing our growth further, and are we decreasing inequality? So this could be the litmus test of AI. So not just to see AI in terms of functionality, efficiency, speed, velocity, to put it in other words, and simply. So doing things faster. You know, we don't live so we live faster. You know, we want to have a good life. So it's good sometimes to have things faster, but that's not the meaning of life. So in this respect, I think AI is contributing a lot to what we do in the government. Yet we must make sure that the process will be traceable, because we need human review, the possibility for human review. And we also need the real rectification if certain things should be corrected. It's very important to have the right to appeal. In this respect, I would definitely, in current state of affairs with the progress that AI has had so far, much more delegate AI to accounting than accountability. So while accounting is much better done by AI, I think still accountability is better done by humans. I don't know how the future will unfold itself, yet let me emphasize that we should see AI as a tool, as a vehicle, that we can benefit from in culture, economy, education, healthcare, to security and defense. But at the same time, we should make sure that it is not a simple tool like a hammer with which you build a cottage. Even with hammer, you can do harm to others and self-harm to yourself. But nonetheless, AI does not have this substance of being a tool in an objective, physical, and mechanical sense. It's more than that. So it's a tool with which you interact. I'm not saying that we should be afraid. I'm not saying that we should get done with it because it's too risky. I'm just saying that we should play in the sense that both minding the danger and nonetheless embracing it.
Can I ask you, Professor, can I just ask a question to just pick up from what the Prime Minister said? So you've talked about governance models in your latest book, How Progress Ends, and you've talked about how governance can either enable or constrain the benefits of AI. And you've also talked about there being a risk of polarization, a risk of societal stagnation in a moment like this. What are those? Can you talk a little bit about the governance models you think that are needed in a moment like this to ensure that we don't see excessive polarization, which we witness already in politics and society in Europe and beyond? And what's that governance model got to look like to ensure the successful implementation of AI?
So let me link that to a point I think the Prime Minister made quite forcefully, which is that technology is a tool and you can use it for different things. And the same can be said about the computer revolution, which was also, in many ways, extraordinarily transformative. And it still amazes me today that if you go back to the 1990s, you have the personal computer, you have the web, it gives people access to the world's stored knowledge in their pockets, it connects some of the best talent around the world, permits seamless collaboration, it streamlines the research process enormously. And what do you get? A decade streak upsurge in productivity growth from 1995 to 2004, mostly confined to the United States. It still amazes me today that it takes 17 times as many engineers right now to produce Moore's law than it did in the 1970s. And that's happening across a range of industries. And so I think we have to ask ourselves why, and is the problem our institutions and the incentives that we provide rather than the technology itself? And so the point around efficiency I see in my work as well. So I'm an academic, and if you have a powerful productivity tool, you can do one of two things. You can either do more projects, drill more holes, or you can use it to dig deeper into the one thing that you think is really important. The more holes you drill, the more thinly your attention is spread across multiple projects. The less likely you are to make a breakthrough in any given domain. And we see this in the data. The more projects any given scientist or inventor has at any given point in time, the less likely they are actually to push the boundaries, push the frontiers. So if all we aim for is efficiency, that's clearly the wrong goal when it comes to innovation, and that's clearly the wrong goal for many other things in life as well. And so the incentive structures, the reward function that we provide is going to be really important for determining what people do with a new technology. And I think for technologies that are in the early days of invention, that haven't really yet quite matured, I think it's really important to have relatively decentralized models of governance that permits people to experiment widely. And so, back in 1999, Bessemer Venture famously declined to invest in Google. They probably regret it today, but it also illustrates that Google wasn't a safe bet at the time. Alta Vista and Yahoo were dominating search. And so somebody needed to take the risk of investing to know whether this thing will catch on. Today we don't know if the future of AI is large language models. Is it small language models? Is it symbolic AI? Is it some fusion between the two? Is it something else? The only way of finding out is giving people the autonomy to explore and figure that out. And that means vigorous market competition. It means decentralization within organizations so that people that actually work with the technology have the autonomy to take important decisions. And I think that's one of the key reasons, by the way, that the United States did relatively well during the computer revolution is that American firms were more decentralized. And so people that were closer, worked more closely with the technology, they were able to make decisions and they could respond more rapidly to this important technological event that nonetheless didn't quite live up to the expectations. And I think we need to learn those lessons with artificial intelligence as well, because artificial intelligence by itself is not going to lead to the abundance that many people hope. What we need to make sure we do is to provide the right incentives and also safeguard competition that facilitate experimentation and innovation.
given that backdrop, you're in a new phase post very successful election outcome. Kosovo is both aligning with the EU, building democratic institutions, looking to enhance its security and its resilience, and it has to take care of the well-being of a population, a young population, a well-educated population. Given the model and the factors that the professor was just talking about, how do you do all of those things when we have this moment of existential change with AI and technology?
Well, if there is one characteristic of democratic leadership, that is that there is no really an author. You know, it's not like professor wrote a book and signed it in the end. So there is no such thing as author. I do not consider myself author of progress. I consider myself expression of Kosovar society at one point in time who became infrastructure for the progress that they wanted. So vast majority of ideas that we have as a political movement, which won over 51% of elections, of votes in these last elections, came actually from people, from others inspiring us, from others giving us ideas. Some of them we took, some we don't. We do a debate on them, but again, progress has this collective dimension from the onset. We have talented, energetic, multilingual youth. Average age of population in Kosovo is 35. So we are a perfect hub for friendly shoring. And in the past, we've had a lot of business process outsourcing. Next chapter will be into creating our own ecosystems. Tech sector is blooming, for example. There are over 1,500 prominent tech companies. Over 80% of what they create and produce are for exports. It's 15% of workforce of Kosovo in tech sector, 6% of GDP. By comparison, agriculture is 7% of GDP. And I think that we're not just going to do fast forward kind of catching up with the rest, but rather I want to believe that we are going to have more original solutions for something which will belong to Republic of Kosova and its people, and especially its youth. So that's why House of Kosova we called home of talent. Because, you know, house can be empty, but home is not empty. Through a certain being, house becomes home. And this being, this entity is talent, and talent is talent of youth. It's in our universities, but also in private sector. The greatest returning on capital, when it comes to government investments, so to speak, was scholarships for women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths. 50% of students, as we speak, in Kosovo, who study in dozens of universities and colleges, are women. By comparison, it's only 17% in average in EU. So, you know, I think we should not just do this like having to catch up with a leader. You know, you should find your own ways in developing. So, also in terms of conditionally speaking, ideological viewpoint in macroeconomics, I'm more of a heterodox. You know, like, you need to combine things, what suits you best. And in this respect, by growing, we also see that possibilities for further growth are further growing. And this is what makes me think that of Kosovo, we can speak in the near future as if it is new Estonia of Southeast Europe, Or perhaps Estonia Plus, something that others will refer to us. I think we have high ambitions, but these are ambitions of our youth.
There's something of a roadmap in what you've written in your last book that I think is potentially instructive or interesting for Kosovo. You've talked about the importance of networks. You used the phrase collective brain and the idea that innovation emerges from a dense network of people and ideas and institutions. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that network effect? Because for a small country which has a young population, well-educated population, but also the added value of its global network, and Switzerland is the second home for Kosovans. I mean, this is so. Can you talk a little bit about that network model and issue, and then perhaps we talk about how it might apply in the Kosovo context?
So in the 1920s, America introduced prohibition. And you might think that, that's a policy that shouldn't have that much of an impact on innovation. But actually, because saloons were where people met after work and discussed ideas, prohibition meant that those social networks essentially disappeared. And as a consequence of that, you see a very marked decline in patenting, not just in terms of collaborations, but even solo patenting, because people become less exposed to new ideas that they will often get at the saloon. And, various saloons catered to different occupations. So this was really, a place where people met after work and exchanged knowledge and ideas. And so when you disrupt a social network, you imperil your collective brain. And so having a society that is rich in trust is really important, because if I share an idea with you and I can't trust you, why on earth will I do it? You might just steal my idea anyways. If you tell me that, all I need because, I've dehydrated is, water and sugar instead of medicine, and I don't know you, why on earth should I believe that? And so for technology transfer as well, trust is really important. And I think for countries that have a young population, because most people tend to, unfortunately for me, do their most innovative work early in life, we have that in the data, and a society with high levels of female labor force participation. That's also important, because otherwise you exclude a large part of your collective brain. Or a society with closed borders will also imperil its collective brain, because what you get is that people who go out and work abroad come back and bring back knowledge home, right? And so a key success story for the development of China has been the Chinese diaspora that came back after the grand opening in 1978 and helped rebuild the country. And so the free flow of knowledge and ideas, I think, is absolutely critical to innovation in any society. And I think it's also a big part of the European project that we should, treasure and continue to support.
Since both of you mentioned brain several times, can I make a wish?
Yes.
I wish AI will, in the near future, be used with a specific focus on us trying to understand better and more brain, rather than just trying to partially substitute or exceed it. Because definitely, in spite of scientific progress, brain still remains under-researched. So we could say that we humans still, at some extent, are strangers to ourselves. And I wish AI will be used not only to tell us how it can do as good as we or better than we, but to understand deeply and more thoroughly this we, meaning human beings, the brain of human beings. So I think that many of the pioneers of machine learning, when they initially started, actually they had much more this in mind than we do have as a generation nowadays.
I'm going to bring us to a close, but I think that notion, articulates very clearly something that we all hope for, that technology doesn't become our destiny, but that it enables our destiny. It enables us to get the very best from all the genius that exists within the human brain and within our characters. And without that, as your book illustrated, deep inequalities can prevail and societies can be fractured. I think progress clearly depends, as you were saying, Prime Minister, on leadership, on sound governance. With those, we'll get the best from innovation, build a strong middle class, and see a thriving society. And Kosovo's experience recently with strong economic growth, a very engaged, politically aware young population, suggests that the country's in a strong place and can make an important contribution to Europe. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much as well. What we have done in these past 5 years, we have been working hard and intervening smart. And we look forward to do ever more and ever better in the next mandate.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Prime Minister.